My name's Matt Pearson. I'm the product owner of Predict, the artist formerly known as Predictive Analytics until about 24 hours ago. I've been with Guidewire a little over 7 years, and I've been the product owner of Predict for a little over 2. And just on a personal note, before getting started, just like to thank you for coming here to Connections. I know it's weird with the masking and the distancing, but I think it's a really special event, and we tried our hardest with the online versions, but I think it's just a lot better to be in person. Okay, you've probably seen this slide 100 times by now at the conference. Just to remind you, it's basically saying that anything that I present, especially something future-facing, is not a contract between me and you to go out and build that specific feature. So as I was preparing for this, I wanted to start out by just kicking off and articulating how much and how fast things are moving in this space being machine learning, artificial intelligence, predictive analytics. So I found this quote from Bill Gates, thought great, titan of industry, saying exactly what I wanted to say. Then when I put it in a slide and I started thinking about where I was going to be and who I was going to be talking to, my next thought was this. I mean, brave stance, Matt, to get up in front of a group of people that are basically at an InsurTech conference who opted in to a session about predictive analytics and then tell them that this space is moving fast. So I quickly pivoted. I decided our time would best be spent talking about the implications of this change, and more importantly, what we at Guidewire are doing within the Predict platform to help you stand out from your competition. And that's what we're going to do over the next 45 minutes. I'm going to start out just kind of taking a step back and talking about the motivation for what we've built over the last year or so. In particular, it was a challenge that we saw within the industry, and we thought that we were uniquely positioned to address that challenge. We'll then talk about our answer to that challenge, and spoiler alert, it's the smart loop. You guys have probably heard this half a dozen times in various ADS track presentations. I'll give my spin on it and talk about how Predict sits at the center of that smart loop. And then we're going to get into the product and start taking a look at some of the features that we're announcing at this Dobson release. And the three themes of what we've built over the last year or so is we're building for speed, we're building for flexibility, and we're building for a results-oriented product. My prepared remarks are 35 to 40 minutes, and then I'll leave time at the end for Q&A. If I don't get to your questions or you're shy or whatever, I'll stick around afterwards. There's like a 15-minute turn of the room, so just grab me and we'll go from there. One other little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We know that we have a diverse room in terms of where you guys are on your cloud journey. Some of you guys are already there. Congratulations, that's wonderful. Some of you guys are Guidewire core customers or self-managed and are planning that transition. And some of you guys are just Predict customers and don't have another Guidewire product. So what we're doing throughout the presentation, anything that I present is available as out-of-the-box product for the cloud customers. When you see this icon next to a feature, that indicates that it's also available for you as self-managed and for non-Guidewire core customers. All right, so we're going to spend some time talking about the smart loop and how it removes the friction. But as I said, I wanted to talk a little bit about our motivation for why we built this loop. You guys are in this industry, so you probably see headlines like we do all the time here on the left. Reuters is saying that 90% of you are investing in big data projects and that the stakes are really just too big to fail. The dark side of this industry and the dirty little secret is what you see on the right. You guys, unfortunately, a lot of people are failing at a high rate. Gartner says it's about 65% or 60%. If you actually look into the notes from that article, the analyst admits it's closer to 85. VentureBeat, not to be outdone, came in and said 87, which I don't know, 85, 87. And then talk about Captain Obvious. McKinsey has a quote saying, you guys aren't getting the return on investment that you would expect. How could you? If you're failing at 85% of the time every time you look at one of these projects, there's no way the 15% success rate can overwhelm that high failure rate. So this is our motivation, seeing the disconnect between your aspirations and what you're trying to do and probably what people in the C-suite are expecting of you in terms of data analytics, and then boots on the ground, what's actually happening. So we asked ourselves why. Why is this happening? We know people are in insurance for a really long time. They have data scientists, data engineers. This failure rate should not be going at such a high rate. So we just started out by mapping out the model building process and then looking for the weak point. Because you guys are in the space, I'll do the build out pretty quickly because I think it's fairly intuitive for you guys. So you start, you get your data, you build your models, you deploy them, you embed them back into the core workflow if that's something that you're trying to do, and then you evaluate them. And then once you go through that system once, you wait a year or two, and you go through it again. All right, so where's the weak point? Problem is, to just start the project, you need your data scientist and your actuaries. To deploy it, you need to go talk to your ML ops colleagues. I think you see where we're going here, so I'll continue the build out. In order to get around this loop once and get one model into production, you have to coordinate with 5 very specialized, very expensive teams within an organization. So my slide says why, as in, why are you failing at such a high rate? When you look at it from this perspective, maybe a better title is, how does this ever go right? How do you ever win here? And a question I always like to ask prospects or our current customers is something along the lines of, how many projects within your organization never actually get started, let alone started and failed and contribute to that 85% number because you guys intuitively know this. So you basically say, why try? So that's our motivation. We saw this and we thought, we're Guidewire. We're in a better position than anybody to help solve this challenge. And our answer, as you probably heard in a couple other sessions, is the smart loop and how it removes the friction in this model building process. We harmonize, we integrate, and we make all of this out-of-the-box base product. And we think nobody else in the industry is in a position to do this. So let's map our products and our processes to this loop. Starts with data. This is data coming off of Claim Center and Policy Center. We curate it, we load it onto the Predict platform. We then go out and we leverage third-party external data. This could be our syndicated data coming off our Compare product, or it could be coming from our Assess product, formerly known as Science for Small Business. Eventually, it will include data from Hazard Hub. That was the session right before me. That acquisition happened a few months ago, too recent to be able to add in to the product as base product, but look for more of that to come. Finally, we build our models, we deploy them, we embed them as we have, and we've been able to do this within Predict for years, and then we learn continuously on how those models are doing through our products like Explore and Compare. The good news is, we completed our development and connected this smart loop. We did this a few months ago, we announced it, and we released 2 use cases with it. And if you joined us for those online connection sessions, you might have noticed that we were promoting it. It's terrible lighting, I'm so glad to be back here. And we were promoting it. Okay, so again, we completed the loop a few months ago. Let's talk about what we're announcing in Dobson and how the features that we have created and made available help you stand out from your competition. And the first theme, as I mentioned, is we're building for speed. The first thing that we're doing with our smart loop is adding a use case library. We had 2 use cases a few months ago. When I had to submit these slides 3 or 4 weeks ago, we were at 8. We're now up to 10. What we have here are some of the more common issues that you see within the claim side and on the policy side. And what we provide is that curated data set for modeling purposes coming off the core system. It automatically gets loaded into Predict and ready for your data scientist or your actuaries. At that point, we have what I call a recipe book that helps you efficiently build a model for that use case. We then have instructions and templates of how to deploy it and embed it back into the core system. And what we found is that using this use case library on our smart loop, we're able to reduce the model building lifecycle by 80%. I don't think I got the reaction that I was expecting. we're able to reduce the, thank you, it's my plant. We're able to reduce it by 80%. But in addition to this use case library that we're building on the smart loop, our solutions are also finding their way into the broader Guidewire solutions. If you attended any of the core sessions, you would have heard about two major initiatives, one on the claims side, one on the policy side. One is Claims Autopilot, and the other is Renewal Workbench. All of the decisions that go into that workflow of what should happen next is driven by analytics coming off of our smart loop. Okay, so let's get into the product and show you exactly what it's doing. I said that we're built for speed, it's fast. I'm anticipating you guys saying, okay, how fast? So the first thing that we're gonna show is adding a modeling data set, getting prep data onto Predict, and ready for your data scientists and actuaries. So in lieu of a live demo where I'd be jumping between machines and context switching on you, when I hit go on the next one, it's just gonna start a pre-recorded demo that I have. I have 3 of these, each one's roughly a minute. What I'll do is I'll tee it up before we get there. I'll do some light narration over it to tell you what we're seeing, and then we'll just regroup on the back end and explain what you just saw. Again, this is the modeling data set, landing on Predict. This is something that used to take about 6 to 8 weeks. It took your data scientists and your data engineers, frequently took an engagement with our services team. So let's take a look. So if you're new, is it moving? Okay. If you're new to Predict, 3 main sections, build, deploy, and monitor. Because this is the first mile problem, what we're doing is showing how we start our modeling process, which is bringing data onto the platform. What's happening with that Spinny G is it's going and it's accessing all of the data sources available to it. One that's in there now that wasn't before is data, access to the cloud data platform. When I recorded this a few weeks ago in my demo environment, I had 3 such data sets all on the claim side. For any use case, they'll also be there on the policy side as well. And then you select which one you want. This was a total loss one. And at that point, the data is streaming into the Predict platform. Now, I'll admit, this is demo data, so it's built to just show it really quickly. So it wouldn't take 45 seconds in reality. But let's say it takes 2 hours or 4 hours to get 3 to 5 years of data or 300,000 rows to come across. You compare 6 to 8 weeks in a services engagement to 2 to 4 hours to get at the same spot. If you're using the smart loop, that's an incredible advantage compared to anybody that's not. Okay, so that was the first mile problem and how we're solving that and building for speed. The next one, I'm gonna talk about the last mile problem. So this is, you've built a model, you've deployed it, and you want to get it back into the workflow so you have it in front of the right people at the right time. When I hit go on this, what you'll be seeing is a super user within Claims Center logging into the Analytics Manager and basically doing what I just said, connecting that deployed model into the workflow, deciding what screens should be seen and what data should be put in front of the end user. Super users logging in. And for each one of the use cases that we publish, we have a template for how to get this back into the workflow. You can go off menu, build your own. In this case, the user is using a template. And it's for segmentation. The next thing that's happening here is you're picking the endpoint, confirming that that's where the scoring API is. You're determining the business rules under which this model should be fired. You're then indicating what data needs to go up to the scoring service, what data comes back, and then finally, you're indicating what you want the end user to see in terms of the influence codes. And then what's really powerful about this is that as a user's hitting save, this is live. You don't need to redeploy Claims Center or Policy Center. What we're showing here is the very next claim that comes in is going to be scored with that model. So again, this is a process that typically took 1 to 2 months, maybe even longer. I've heard horror stories about you get all the way to being able to deploy a model, then you try to get it back into the workflow, and it can take almost a year to get the business side to sign off on it. Again, The built for speed competitive advantage of 1 to 2 months versus 90 seconds is an incredible advantage for people on the smart loop. There's also what I would call a hidden benefit here, and it really comes down to flexibility. This is a new model that you're putting in front of your workers. The dirty secret is that you're probably not going to stick the landing on exactly what you want to show when you want to show it the first time. So you can release this to a small group, get feedback after a few weeks, come back 90 seconds later, make an adjustment. Get feedback, expand it to a wider group, and go from there. Again, that flexibility in conjunction with the speed is an incredible advantage. Okay, so speaking about flexibility, the next section, I'm going to talk about how we're opening up the platform to allow you to use the tools that you're comfortable with. I put a cute little subheader there saying breaking down barriers. That's because a lot of times within insurance organizations, and especially within analytics departments, the tools that you pick to get your job done border on a religious debate. And so what we're saying here is forget all that, use what you want to use, and we'll support you on the smart loop. I've been up here about 15 minutes, basically just talking all by myself. I want to get a little light audience participation. I have 3 scenarios where I'm going to say, what would you prefer? Would you prefer this tool or that tool? It's nothing dramatic, just show of hands. Tell me where you are. I think it would be interesting for us to learn together to see where the room is. I have suspicions where they are, but let's learn together. So the first question is, if you are a modeler, or you have a modeler in your life that you work with, and they're about to start a project, would they rather have a code-first experience, or would they rather log into an app, a guided UI, and have that experience? Let me explain just a little bit more. If you are code-first, this doesn't scare you, what you're seeing. You like command lines, you like Python, you like Jupyter Notebooks. If you are UI experience first, you like this on the right. You want the safety of logging into an app that's purpose-built for what you're trying to do. Okay, so let's vote. Who is team code first? Okay, and then I guess the other, who is team guided modeling experience? Yeah, all right. So I figured this would happen. What you're seeing on the right is a future version of Predict that should be out in a few months. That's always been our DNA. We've always said, we're going to provide a UI, you can log into our app, efficiently build superior models, and deploy them. We've never invested in the code-first approach, until now. Over the last years, we made tremendous investment in what we call BYOM, or bring your own model. We're very literal at Predict, that exactly what the feature does, that's what we name it. And the whole goal of it was to make the use of open source tools safe to bring into a production environment. Started about a year ago. We said, if you can get it to PMML, we'll support you, bring it onto our loop. We then expanded to include Python and scikit models. As of Dobson, we're announcing a major expansion of this feature. The number of libraries and packages that we're going to support is really too big to list here. If you want a list, feel free to talk to me afterwards, and I'll send you an email. Some of the highlights are XGBoost, SHAP, Panda, PyTorch. If that means nothing to you, don't worry about it. You're not alone, but your data scientists and your actuaries are going to love it. So the why is important here. Why have we been investing in this, and how does it help you compete? The first, it wasn't a ton of people, but there were a handful of people in the room that are code first. So if you want them to do a modeling project and you hand them a UI, all you're going to do is frustrate them. They don't want it. They don't want to have to learn a new tool. They have the tools that they like. The second is that we found a lot of our customers are really good at the first couple parts of the loop. They can get data, even though it might be painful, and they can build models. Where they struggle is they can't get it into a deployed or into a production environment. So they can't deploy, embed, or monitor. Frequently what happens, the symptom of if you're a candidate for this, is that you have a lot of models just sitting in a local machine. Can't get off that developer's local machine and into production. So we're basically making the deal with our customers. If that use case fits you and you need help on the back end of the loop, deploying and embedding, we're here for you. This is your on-ramp. The third advantage, and this we should have thought about when we started building it, but we didn't find out until we started working with our dev partners, is that the first thing our dev partners did was take this feature, go back to those 85% of the projects that had failed, dust them off, and see if that model is a candidate for this feature. And if it was, you automatically rescue the ROI from that project. So it goes from something being failed to something that's actually a benefit for you. Again, having these two options, code first or UI, is a tremendous advantage if you're on this loop. Okay, so we solved that debate. You can have both. That will be the theme through the next few of these, just a spoiler alert. So I said it was fast, so let's show this in action. What I'm going to show when I hit play is me going to my local environment, grabbing a Scikit model, and loading it onto the Predict platform, where it's then ready for deployment and integration back into the core system. So again, if you're looking at Predict, you can basically put a big X through the build section because that was done somewhere else. We jump right into the deployment area, and this is just a simple upload experience. You go in, you name your model, you have to verify or indicate what you're actually loading, and then of course just give a description so you remember what it is. And then what will happen is, once I select that file, again, this is a Scikit model, and I hit open on it, within the platform, you're going to see a spinning G. And what's happening is the system is validating that this is acceptable to the Predict platform. At the time, again, it was only those two that we supported. Now it's much bigger. And then once we confirm that it's valid, it's ready for deployment downstream. So, I mean, that was 45 seconds. Yes, there was work beforehand that had to be done in order to build the model. Yes, there's work that has to be downstream. But in terms of taking something that might have been locked on a local machine that's now available for the smart loop experience is a tremendous advantage. Okay, so this next one is a classic debate in data science. And I'll admit, I'm actually ripping this off from Chris Cooksey did a riff on this a few years ago. And it's fairly straightforward. But assume you're in the middle of a modeling process, or you know the modelers in your life that work on these things. And you only have time or resources to invest in one more thing. You can either invest in going out and getting more data and bringing it to your project, or you can go out and explore new or better techniques and bring it to your project. Where do you guys land? Who is on team data? Okay. Who is on team technique? Okay, and I think for some of you, I just confused you. Again, not surprising. On the right is predictive analytics. And again, our DNA has been the story of you get the data, or we'll help you get the data. You bring it onto our platform. We'll provide you with a bunch of techniques that get the best outcome within the industry. And we'll continue to do this. What we're highlighting here on the right-hand side is that we've added deep neural networks via TensorFlow to the base platform. So you can start building models using that algorithm. And as we continue to see algorithms evolve within the industry that are beneficial to the P&C space, we'll just keep doing this. But, and there are only a handful of you, but for those that are interested in more data, we've added a ton of external data to the platform, like this. Now, don't try to read it. It was intentionally meant to be an eyesore. It was meant to overwhelm you. And this is actually just a subset of the data that we're adding to the platform. And this is just from Assess, again, formerly known as Science for Small Business. What Assess offers is about 150 risk scores for any given location. And not surprisingly, what we found when we've done experiments is that if you run a model just using data coming off of the core system, then you append the 150 risk scores to that data set, rerun your models, you see much better outcomes. And so what we're announcing today at Connections and in this Dobson release is that we're making all 150 data points for Predict customers free. And you're probably sensing a catch, and there is a slight one. You can use these 150 data points for free within Build. So go in there and have that experience that we talked about and that we discovered with our development partners. Take your base data sets, add the 150 risk scores, run your models, see if it's valuable to you. If it is, at that point you will need to come and talk to us about an assessed license if you want to put that model into production. But that's a huge advantage for you because you're not spending an extra dollar until you find out that the model is more accurate, provides more lift, and you can look at whatever the cost of the license is, look at the benefit that you think you're going to get as a business, and only when the ROI pencils for you do you have to make that investment. And as the title says, this doesn't include Hazard Hub. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, it was too late to integrate this out of the box, but we will be looking to do that for the next release, and we hope to have a similar pattern. So some sort of subset of that data will be available for free. Go in, sandbox to your heart's content, and then if at that point you want to deploy a model using that data, come talk to us about a license. Okay, so we solved two things. The third one, and this one's fairly straightforward, so it won't take much setup, but if you are about to embark on a modeling exercise and just pick one in your head, claim side, policy side, would you prefer a custom-built model or would you prefer an out-of-the-box model? Trade-offs are fairly straightforward. Custom-built, you get exactly what you want, but you have to invest some time to build it. Not as much time now that we have the smart loop because it reduces it by 80%. Out of the box, you get value immediately, no work on your end, but it might not be exactly what you wanted, and if you had done a custom build, you might have done it better. So let's poll the room. Who would want custom built? Yeah, okay. And who would want out of the box? Okay. Again, not surprising because Predict has historically always been team custom built. We've never had this idea of something that's out of the box. But where did we land on this? Again, the theme here is we're offering both. The why is important. The why is that we believe what you're seeing on the left is the path that you should have for any use case. First, if there's a model available for it that's out of the box, go ahead and grab it and plug it into your system. Then observe it. See if you're getting the business impact that you would hope from it. If you're not, look for ways to improve it. If you think that you can do better and you think that the improvements and the business impact results outweigh the cost of going to build that model, then sure, by all means, greenlight a project to custom build one of these models. And the example I put here is that I concede, so I'm fighting the room. Most everybody here is team custom built. And I concede that there are certain use cases where you would only want custom built models. The example I give is pricing. Many, if not most of you guys, would never cede that to an out-of-the-box model. But I would argue the flip side of that there are plenty of use cases within a P&C organization on the claims and on the policy side where you don't need the heavy lifting of a custom-built model. We talked about it takes a lot of time, it's a huge failure rate. Why put that sort of risk? It's just not worth the investment, and it's actually just overkill. It's like this ice cream that they're giving to the girl. It doesn't make sense for what you're trying to do. Sometimes a lighter approach is more important. And so we would argue that you should use, in those cases, an out-of-the-box model. Okay, so we did it. We brought people together, breaking down barriers. You can have code first. You can have your custom UI. You can have more data. You can have more algorithms. You can have a custom-built model. And you can have an out-of-the-box model. For the last section, I want to talk about how we're building for a results-driven and results-oriented product. And in particular, this is the introduction of what we call business impact monitoring. and also the ability to do this within real time. This is different from statistical monitoring. We've had that in the product for years. Did the variables drift? Is the score distribution what I would expect? This is different. This is for a business leader, and it's answering the question of, am I getting the value that I had expected when I decided to greenlight this project? And it's really what we call an evolution of 3 questions, and it's just basically, is it working? And the first step of is it working technically? And this is fairly stable, table stakes. You don't want to put a model into production unless you've done this. But this is, does it trigger when it's supposed to? Do the right variables go up? Is the right thing coming back? Do we trigger our workflow rules accordingly? The second one is a little bit deeper and a little bit more subtle, and that is the team actually adopting the recommendations that I'm putting out there? And what we found is that most companies are so focused on 1 and 2 and struggle with especially the second one, is that they never get to the third one, which we think is the most important. And that is, what are the business results, and are they what's expected? And the organizations that do this well, that's the key to unlocking the relationship between the data scientist and the actuary team and the business team. And what you'll see in those organizations is an acceleration of how many models they get into production, because there's inherent trust and there's a line of sight into the business results for that business leader. So they're much more willing to invest in new projects and new use cases. So let's take a look at how we're handling this within the Smart Loop. I'll set the scene of the use case that we're going to go over. It's on the policy side, but again, it could be on the claim side. You just change the names and the KPIs, but the general theme is the same. The use case is that we're trying to automate policy submissions. And the business objectives that we're trying to meet are twofold. We're trying to reduce the average workload for our underwriters, and we're trying to increase the bound premium. The theory is that if our underwriters are completely overwhelmed and we automate away the automatic accepts and the automatic declines, you're just leaving the underwriters what they can focus on that's the most important to them. And as a result, not only are they going to be less overworked and less frazzled, they're actually going to get better results, and we're going to increase the bound premium. What we're going to show here is how we can do this as an evolution over time. A business leader's concerns will change from day 1 when the model goes into production versus something 3 or 6 months down the line. And so the first snapshot I'm going to show is first day it goes into production. Then I'm going to show it's about 2 to 4 weeks. And then the last one I'm going to show is it's been elapsed enough time to be able to really look at dollar results, so 3-6 months. What we're showing here is, again, one of the major objectives was we want to reduce average caseload. And for a business leader, they would be coming to their desk on Monday morning. Let's assume the model went out on a Sunday night or Saturday night. And as they sit down at their desk, they get to see something like this, where the dotted vertical line shows when it went into production. And sure enough, the average caseload was bumping along pretty high, and it dropped first thing when basically the entire backlog for the underwriters were scored, and the automated ones came off of their plate. So this gives the business leader confidence. Great, I put something into production. My first objective of reducing caseload came true. I don't have to do like a hot rollback. I'm not nervous anymore. I'm going to actually watch this for another 2 to 4 weeks. And then that business leader would get a view like this. One of the expectations when we put this model into production was that we would automate about 46% of these submissions. And what we're showing is that, sure enough, we're bumping along at about 47%. So again, more confidence, and that one objective of reducing the average caseload has come true. And then a little bit longer range, we want to start looking at the dollar figures associated with this model. I think this one's a little bit harder to see, but you see the dotted vertical line there on the right-hand side shows when this model went into production. The bar graphs are the bound premium, well, the green part, and what you're seeing is a distinct up and to the right trend. So again, as a business leader, I would declare victory on this model, and I'd be much more comfortable to invest in the next project that my data scientist or my actuary team comes to me with. We think this is a game changer at Guidewire, this part of the smart loop. No one else can offer this in the industry. We have all the ingredients needed to put up KPIs like this. We know what the models are doing. We know what the scores are. We know what happens to those claims and policies over time. We have aggregated data views, and we can put KPIs on top of a BI tool to show you something like this. So we're very excited about this and look for more in the future, but this will be a big drive for our future investments is the business impact monitoring. Okay, so last slide, and I see that I'm starting to run out of time, so I'll actually go through this a little bit quicker than I planned because I did want to get to the Q&A. But it's been a very exciting year at Predict. And in this presentation, we walked through a bunch of the features that we've announced and we've released for Dobson. We had three main themes. The first is that we're building for speed, and it's the conjunction of the smart loop with our use case library that allows us to drive down the modeling lifecycle by 80%. The second major theme is that we're building for flexibility, and we're allowing your data scientists to use the tools that they want to use. The one I would highlight here would be the BYOM expansion. Going from just 2 libraries that we support to an explosion of a whole bunch will really open up the freedom of your data scientists to use those tools knowing that they will be supported in porting them onto the smart loop. And then finally, what we just covered, we're building for a results-oriented product, and that's the introduction of business impact monitoring. And again, something that we'll continue to invest in over time.